You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yernosian. Today, I'm joined alone because I do have some questions from a little Q&A that I did a few months back and more recently that I think would be fun to talk about. So, first off, I been taking some time to really reflect on what more do I want to do with this podcast and this community to help inspire some kind of community driven input. I love it when people provide me some input. And so some ideas I've had over the past couple months have been maybe just asking questions of people and maybe answering some of those. So this could be a fun opportunity to do a little bit of that. So, first question that a friend of mine asked was, what inspired me to actually do this podcast? So there are a lot of different podcasts out there, right? Like people have their own opinions on how people should live their lives or what they should do to improve their lives. And what I've seen is that I've learned a lot about myself, about certain truths that I've found that are very personal, that resonate with other people. I don't believe in the idea of an objective truth, just because I don't believe that there's this universal concept of a 100% truth. If you go deep enough and push any fact deep enough, you will find that there is some ambiguity to it. For instance, let's take the idea of gravity, or how we experience gravity. How we experience gravity on Earth is very specific to the mass of Earth and our closeness to the Earth. But if we were living on a different planet, our concept of that gravity, how we experience gravity, would be different. So in that sense, is gravity not an objective truth? Well, it is an objective thing it is a thing that we all feel and that we all experience, but maybe how we experience it isn't objectively consistent if you look at the whole universe. It all depends on our reference relative to other large masses. And that's an example of one that's a little bit more ambiguous, and we understand that the theory of gravity seems to be consistent from a physical perspective. But when you look at deeper levels, if you look at the levels of quantum mechanics, gravity is mysteriously not quite there. In fact, it's a whole area of quantum mechanics to look into. How do you unify quantum mechanics and gravity? There's this idea that maybe there's this unifying theory of physics that will combine the two, but it's not yet something that we understand. So what does that kind of mean for my idea of why I started this podcast? Well, the truths that I've come to aren't going to resonate with everyone. The things I talk about, a lot of people just kind of glaze over them. Maybe you've not really cared about a lot of the things I've talked about, which is fine. But the beauty of it is that certain things resonate with certain people. For instance, I had a friend who was watching a couple episodes and commented on some conversations that I had with someone about capitalism and how we experienced capitalism. And that was something that they found to be kind of eye-opening, maybe because they had similar reservations. In another case, I was having a completely unrelated conversation, but I brought up the concept of food and how we sometimes judge ourselves for what we choose to order, and how in the past, sometimes I like to go to restaurants and order something that I feel like I might enjoy, but I have no idea. I've never tried it before, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Earlier today, I did that at brunch. I went to brunch with a friend and I ordered a dish that I had no idea what it was going to look like. It looked completely different from what I expected, but it was really lovely, and I'm really glad I did it. And this long tangent is to say that certain people pick up on certain things that I talk about. And the fact that it resonates with them, certain words, certain stories, certain anecdotes resonate with people means that that there's something there. And what I hope this podcast ultimately will do for you, dear listener, is that maybe you'll find something that I say or one of my guests say that resonates with you. And I want you to, if you feel like you're sticking to something that I've said or that someone you've heard on this podcast, I want you to ask yourself, what is there? Why did this resonate with me? Because I think you can gain a lot of understanding about who you are, about finding your authentic chaos when you start to investigate why certain things are picked up to you. And I found this works with even total strangers. Like I was at a party the other day talking with with someone I just barely met about platonic relationships and how Plato viewed platonic relationships as the pinnacle of a relationship. That once you got past the baser aspects of a relationship, all the physical and sexual intimacies, and you still stay together for the emotional or the mental, the intellectual aspects of a relationship, Plato saw that as the peak of what every relationship should adhere to, either talking about philosophy or working through similar goals or even emotions. That is what every relationship should prescribe to. And he found this very enlightening because he had been going through this constant struggle within himself of questioning himself and kind of shaming himself for viewing his relationships with his longest friends more strongly than his relationship with his significant other. And that's something that society would tell you is not something you should be doing. You should be putting your significant other on a pedestal. How many of us have heard that we need to be best friends with our partners? But sometimes that's not realistic. Sometimes your best friend is not the person you're in a relationship with. Sometimes that best friend and you have gone through so many things that it's unrealistic to say that that your new best friend will be your partner. And that's okay. We're all different. We all value relationships differently. And my point to him was that you shouldn't shame yourself for what you feel. And that's something I want you to take away, dear listeners. And that's a big reason why I want to put out this podcast, put out this voice out there. Because there's many voices out there telling you to be shamed about who you are or why you think the way you do, or telling you to be angry and blame other people for feeling the way you do. But I don't want you to feel shame. I don't want you to feel anger. I don't want you to point fingers at other people. I want you to notice these sensations, these resonances, or these weird feelings, and I want you to look a little closer. I want you to examine it. I want you to cry a little bit and maybe look a little bit deeper and say, why is this here? Why is this? Why am I feeling this? There might be something behind it, maybe a trauma that hasn't quite healed that is worth examining. And once you clear these traumas, what I found in my journey is once I cleared these traumas, I was able to heal and find my voice, find myself, find my values more unambiguously, find my authentic chaos. And in the ashes, or in the healing process, I was born anew, not much unlike a phoenix reborn from the ashes. And that's something, it's a powerful feeling, and it's a feeling of freedom. It's a feeling of not needing to control your life anymore, because you don't need to worry about control. Once you've found yourself, you can harness yourself to navigate you through the chaotic waters of life. And you'll be able to go with the flow. So that's a primary reason of why I decided to start this podcast. Some things that I was saying were resonating with people, and I wanted more people to hear it because, in my view, this is like a fulfillment for me. One of my fulfillments in life is if I can help people maybe think about themselves in a different way, or maybe ask themselves the questions that they had been afraid to ask, then I feel like I've done my job. And so, yeah, It's a really beautiful question. Another friend asked about how I have such a lovely voice to do podcast episodes like this. And, I've been definitely blessed with a nice, deep baritone voice. And the power of audio engineering definitely accentuates that. Have you ever have you ever encountered this, dear listener, where you've heard a audio recording of yourself and it sounded weird, right? Like maybe it sounds uncanny, like it sounds cringy, it sounds weird. I found that I didn't like the sound of my voice when I recorded it. And it wasn't until I started doing this podcast and getting like invested in mics and looking into like different like audio aspects to like cut certain audio and accentuate certain audio that I realized that how I heard my voice being recorded from phones, for instance, was very different from how I experienced my voice in my head. Think about it. When we hear our own voice, we're not really just hearing it from our outer ears. We're also hearing it from the vibrations that we create in our skull. We're hearing it as we're saying it. And so a lot of us experience it very differently from how other people might hear it, and especially how it might get recorded by like phone microphones. But when you start to really focus on respecting the audio engineering process and making and really accentuating the parts of your voice that maybe you experience better, you start to become more harmonized with your recordings. Now I find that I really enjoy the sound of my recorded voice because it sounds more similar to how I experience my voice. And so I'm lucky that, one, I have a deep voice, which, I've been told is really good for radio and podcasting, but also that I've put enough respect into trying to understand how to accentuate that voice. So that way I can give you an excellent viewing and listening experience. Now I have one last question to go through. And before I do that, I want to say thank you for everyone who has been watching and listening to my podcast. It means a lot to me. I haven't been really good at marketing this, so it's a lot of my close friends who are listening, and I really appreciate it. It shows me that people care about what I have to say, and maybe it resonates with you. If something I say resonates with you, please feel free to share it with me. I love talking about this, and if there's any way, I would love to learn deeper about who you are and maybe why these certain things resonate with you. So, a very special person to me asked me this final question. How are we sure that what we're experiencing is actually real? And so this is a deeper question for sure. There's a lot of ambiguity in here. And so I asked a little bit of a follow-up question to this person about what does actually real mean. And this goes back to the whole idea of how do we know that what we're perceiving is objectively true? Is there an objective version of reality? There is the idea of is there an objective truth? Is there this objective reality that we should all be experiencing together? For instance, how you're experiencing me. Maybe the color of my shirt. I view this as a bit of a purple, but maybe you'd view it as, maybe you'd describe it as a different color. Maybe the shade of purple that it looks like for me is different from what it looks like for you. Maybe how you're experiencing my voice is different from how I experience it for myself. In fact, it likely is, because I'm experiencing my voice from a very different perspective than how you're experiencing my voice. So then that begs the question, well, which one is more true? If you experience my voice one way and I experience it in another way, which one is more objectively real? Well, maybe they're both right. Can they both be right? Maybe the objective reality is actually not what we think it is. Maybe there is no such thing as an objective reality that makes sense to even talk about. I like to say that, and I've said this many times, that we live these hyper-personalized existences. We as humans, we take in the noise, the random information from the world around us, from the universe, and our brains like filter it to create this concept of a world that we can actually react to. And a lot of those filters are based on biases and based on like evolution and how we grew up and our current mental state of mind. It's said that people who are in a depressed state will generally view colors more darker and see fewer contrasts than people who are in a more lighter state of mind or a happier state of mind. And people who've have gone through poverty and through scarcity will view things in different ways. Maybe you'll look at like food in a different way than people who have like lived with more abundance. But so then the question is, well, which one is more real? And the real answer is maybe there is no real. Maybe it doesn't make sense to talk about an objective real because all that matters to us is our personal real. But the beauty of it is that even though we all live these hyper-personalized existences through our minds that like we can't replicate in other people, there are still similarities in what we're describing, and we can use the coarse tool of language to help describe between each other so that we can come to agreements. So maybe we experience my shirt in different ways. Maybe we experience food in different ways. Maybe we experience money or the weather in different ways. But because we're all living in these societies and have these similar shared experiences and we can talk about it, we can come up with these shared, personalized realities, these shared realities that we all kind of agree to. And maybe this is like part of the idea of a social contract too. Like with the social contract, we have certain rules or guidelines that we live by to make society function, and it wouldn't make sense to function without it. Things like don't murder people, don't hurt people, be kind. These things aren't like mandated within our DNA, but we want them, we uphold them because we want to be part of this social contract. But it doesn't make any of those objectively real or objective truths. But it doesn't matter that they're objective truths because we make them shared, personalized truths. So, is what we're experiencing actually real? The answer, I'd say, is I don't know. I can never know. There have been many philosophers who've asked, like, well, what if we are just brains in vats, brains in jars, and this is just a simulation, maybe the Matrix? I can't say if it is or isn't. But what I can say is that until we have information otherwise, this is the most real life we have. This is the life we have. If you have other information or other lived experience that maybe this is like there is more to the world, then that's interesting, and I want to hear about that. So please reach out to me and let me know because I would love to chat about that. But besides that, I would say that our existences are hyper-personal. Maybe there is no actual reality, but the meaning that we put onto shared information. But that information is ultimately noise. Ultimately, it doesn't mean anything on an objective sense. The information we take from reality only makes sense when we process it with our minds. And because we don't live in a singularity yet, we don't have shared mind spaces, we don't see things exactly the same. But the beauty of having these communal cultures is that we can have similar language to describe similar things, and that helps us to agree on concepts and have these shared personalized existences. That's the beauty of culture, and it's not something to be frowned upon. It's how we live. It's how we, like, it wouldn't make sense for us to constantly question what the color of a shirt is, or what the sound of a voice is, or what the value of, or what, like, the impact of the weather is going to be. If we kept arguing about those, we wouldn't really be able to discuss anything, right? Like, we wouldn't be able to have any sort of reasonable conversation. But that doesn't make it that, so, but, I mean, sorry, lost my train of thought for a second, but it doesn't make it that, it doesn't make it the most important thing. It doesn't mean that just because we all experience these shared things that they're objectively real, but also objectively real probably doesn't matter. So to answer the question, probably not. It's probably not objectively real, the things we're experiencing, but also it doesn't matter that it's objectively real because we are experiencing them. And if you are experiencing it, then it is real to you. And that's what matters most, I think. I've had conversations with people about pain, and like maybe the pains that I'm feeling, like anxiety and depression, for instance, are a problem for people who have resources, people who don't have to worry about survival. That doesn't mean that anxiety and depression aren't existential threats to us and aren't these huge burdens that we have to like kind of live with and get past and can really trip us up. But it also doesn't mean that like if you're not experiencing those, that you're not experiencing other problems. We all experience pain and we all experience pleasure. And just because our pains and our pleasures are different from other people's pains and pleasures doesn't make it any more real. And so what I worry about when people talk about objective reality is that they use it as a way to detract from their own pain. They say, oh, I'm feeling anxiety, but really this is a small problem because people are starving. So what should I be worried about my anxiety? I'm not going to do anything about it. It's not a problem to deal with. But that's not a great way to handle it too, because you are still suffering. And the fact that you're suffering means that it's something to examine and something to treat as real, because it is real. It's real to you. Even if it's not real on a global sense, it is real to you. And that's all that really matters. Because if you are not safe, then you are not able to help to be your full self. You're not able to find your authentic chaos. We all have traumas. We all have pains. We all have wounds that we need to heal. And if you don't treat your wounds with the respect they deserve, you will never go through the healing process. The healing process, some people like to talk about how healing feels so good. But what we forget is that an important initial part of that healing process is confronting pain. If you've ever had like a broken limb or like a deep wound, you know that the first days of healing are the hardest because you are in the most pain and you might feel pain for months after. But that is all part of the healing process. And the same is true for our healing, our mental scars, our psychic scars, our traumas. We have to treat them with respect. So even if what we're experiencing isn't being experienced by other people, it doesn't make it not real. It is real because you are experiencing it. And I want you to go through the motions of trying to understand it, be aware of it, and let it heal. It may sting at first, but once you let it heal, those traumas will have no power over you. Those ghosts will no longer have power over you. What you thought were demons will be only but shadows to you. And I know I went on like long tangents on this one, and my mind went in many different ways. And this is a good example of how even our thoughts, even the worlds that we live in our heads aren't objectively real, because the way that my mind worked to create this line of thought is very unique to me and may not be unique to you, but maybe something I said resonated. And if it did, then that's lovely. And if it did, and if there's something you'd want to ask about, please do. I would love to hear more. I would love to answer more questions and just have conversations, maybe more like anonymous conversations. Ask questions and I'll answer them on the podcast like I'm doing here. I think this is a fun way to actually like interact with people and with the audience without requiring you to like show yourself and like be on the podcast. So if that's something that is appealing to you, let me know. If you have something you'd like to talk about, just let me know. I am looking forward to having more conversations. Once the heat passes, especially, it'll be a lot easier to have conversations in my apartment. um, anyway, thank you for the questions that people have asked. It's been really great. It's been fun. I'm looking forward to doing many more episodes and having a lot more fun conversations. If you're listening on Spotify, Google, Apple, or YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, follow the podcast. It helps out a lot. Follow us on Instagram at authentic.chaos. Let me know if you have some things you'd like to talk about or suggestions for the podcast, I'm working on doing some like logistics changes, trying to get some mic arms set up and maybe like try to do something with the visual at some point. And I would love some ideas from the audience and just like hearing from you because I love hearing from people. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to chat about today. It's just me, so I like to keep these episodes light. Thank you for listening to my my ramblings, and as always, embrace your chaos with kindness because we really need that self-kindness most of all. Thank you and goodbye.